Do you have an expired cake for my daughter?" The bakery went silent. A dirt-smudged mother stood trembling at the counter, begging for something most people throw away. Her little girl clutched her sleeve, staring at a cake she knew she could never have. What none of them realized was that a millionaire was standing right behind them, listening to every word. The bell above the bakery door jingled softly as Marissa stepped inside, clutching her daughter's hand with fingers that felt too cold for such a warm afternoon. Riverside Avenue glowed outside, sunlight glinting off parked cars, children laughing at a nearby park, the world buzzing with the luxury of normalcy. But inside Marissa's chest there was only a hollow ache, one carved by too many skipped meals and too many nights wondering how to keep going. The scent of fresh bread wrapped around her the moment she entered. Yeasty warmth, powdered sugar, melted chocolate. She inhaled carefully, as if afraid the smell alone could expose how hungry she was. Flora, her daughter, squeezed her hand and tried to stand tall, though her tiny shoulders sagged beneath the weight of exhaustion no child should ever know. Marissa had rehearsed her question a dozen times during the walk. "Do you have any expired cake? Something from yesterday? Anything you're throwing out?" But when she saw the glass cases filled with pastries swirled with cream, cakes stacked high with fruit, and golden loaves lined like artwork, her courage shrank. Everything looked too perfect, too expensive, too far from her world of survival. The workers behind the counter wore crisp aprons. The polished tiles reflected her dusty shoes. Shame tightened around her ribs like a band. Flora shifted closer, eyes drifting toward a strawberry-topped cake on the middle shelf. She didn't point. She didn't ask. She had long learned that some children dream of birthdays, others dream of food. Marissa swallowed hard and stepped forward. "Excuse me." Her voice cracked from dryness and fear. 3 employees glanced up, their smiles dimmed, not out of cruelty but uncertainty. Customers like Marissa did not usually walk in. She cleared her throat. I wanted to ask if you have any expired cake, maybe from earlier this week? Something you were going to throw out?" The silence that followed pierced straight through her. The young cashier looked toward the supervisor, unsure. The supervisor hesitated. They exchanged a tight, helpless glance, because the rules were clear. No giveaways until closing. No exceptions. Marissa saw the hesitation and felt humiliation wash over her. Her cheeks burned. Maybe this had been a mistake. Maybe she should have stayed outside and pretended she wasn't this desperate. Flora tugged at her sleeve again, not begging, just grounding her. Marissa blinked back tears she'd been holding for days. The employees shifted, apologetic but frozen. One of them finally opened her mouth to speak, but the words stumbled on the way out. I'm so sorry, ma'am. It's just, our boss—" "I understand," Marissa whispered quickly, trying to save face. "It's okay. Please don't get in trouble." The air grew thick with discomfort. Customers pretended not to listen but stole glances from the corners of their eyes. Marissa wished she could melt into the floor, wished she could pull Flora outside and shield her from this moment. But someone else had heard the question, every trembling syllable of it. At the far corner of the bakery, a man in a gray suit slowly lowered his cup of coffee. His name was Roland Vance, though no one recognized him out of his boardroom armor. He watched the scene with eyes that carried their own history of loss, and as Marissa stood there, trying not to break, something inside him began to shift. Roland hadn't planned on staying long. He had slipped into the bakery simply to escape a morning full of meetings and pitying smiles from people who still whispered condolences years after his loss. He came here when he needed quiet, when the empty spaces in his home felt too loud and memories of his wife and daughter pressed too heavily against his chest. The blueberry pie he usually ordered was comfort, not indulgence, a ritual, a reminder that life still had small, predictable joys. But today, the ritual broke the moment he heard Marissa's trembling voice. He saw everything, the way her shoulders rounded as if bracing for disappointment, the way her daughter hid behind her sleeve, and the way hunger hollowed out both their faces. Something inside him stirred, something he had tried for years to keep numb. It wasn't charity, it wasn't pity. It was recognition of suffering. A memory flashed uninvited. His own daughter, Lily, tugging at his coat in a bakery much like this one, pointing at a pink-frosted cupcake. That day had been ordinary. Perfectly ordinary. He never knew it would be one of the last simple moments before the accident shattered his world. Roland looked at Flora again. The resemblance wasn't physical. It was emotional. The quiet hope, the careful silence. Children who learned too early that asking for things was dangerous. He stood slowly, straightening his gray suit out of habit, though today it felt less like armor and more like a disguise. No one here knew he owned investment firms, real estate blocks, and 2 foundations. No one knew Forbes had written about him last month. He looked like just another customer, and in this moment, that anonymity felt like a gift. He approached the counter softly, not wanting to draw attention to Marissa's shame or make the moment bigger than it already was. The workers stiffened when they saw him, automatically assuming he was there to complain or rush his order, but instead he offered a gentle smile. "Could you pack the freshest cake you have?" he said, voice steady but warm. "And also, 2 full meal sets. Whatever you'd recommend." The employees blinked, confused but relieved to shift the atmosphere. The supervisor nodded quickly and turned to prepare the order. Roland's presence felt different. Calm, grounded, confident, without any hint of judgment. Marissa frowned, unsure what was happening. She thought this man was simply buying an expensive dessert for himself. She stepped aside, giving him space. But Roland didn't take the bags when the cashier placed them on the counter. Instead, he stepped back, not forward, and looked at Marissa with quiet intention. "These are for you," he said simply. Marissa froze. Her brain scrambled to understand his words. I didn't ask." "You don't have to," he replied softly. The cashier, realizing Roland's act of kindness, gently pushed the bag toward her. The weight of it, warm, fragrant food, hit her like an emotional blow. Her breath caught. Tears pricked her eyes before she could stop them. Flora peeked inside the bag and gasped silently, her small fingers hovering over the wrapped cake as if afraid to touch something so beautiful. For a moment, no one spoke. The bakery grew still, as if witnessing something sacred. Roland didn't smile with pride or expect thanks. He simply nodded once. "Take care of your little girl," he said, voice breaking ever so slightly. Then he turned toward the door, leaving Marissa holding the first full meal she had received in months. Roland stepped outside expecting the cool air to steady him, but instead it felt strangely electric, as if something inside him had shifted and hadn't quite settled yet. He paused near the sidewalk, letting the breeze catch the edges of his suit jacket, unsure why his hands felt slightly unsteady. He had written checks for charities, funded youth programs, donated to hospitals, but none of those things had ever made his chest tighten the way Marissa's trembling gratitude just had. He tried to remind himself that this was nothing more than a simple gesture, a moment of decency. Anyone with a heart could have done the same. Yet, as he watched sunlight spill across the street, he realized it wasn't the act that rattled him. It was the memory it unlocked, the feeling of handing his daughter a treat after school, watching her eyes brighten with a spark that made the world feel gentle again. Inside the bakery, Marissa helped Flora onto the bench just outside the door. The little girl sat gingerly, as if afraid the moment would disappear if she moved too quickly. Marissa opened the bag with careful, almost reverent fingers. The warm air from the packaged meals drifted out, filling the space between them with the scent of something they hadn't experienced in too long. Comfort. Flora leaned closer, her eyes round. "Is this really for us?" she whispered, her voice as fragile as her hope. Marissa nodded, though disbelief still tugged at her expression. Yes, baby. Someone wanted to help. She didn't want to cry again, but seeing the soft frosting on the cake, the fresh berries glistening under the afternoon light, broke something loose inside her. She closed her hand over her mouth, shoulders trembling silently. Flora reached out and placed her hand on her mother's knee, small, warm, reassuring. It's okay, Mommy. We can share. Roland, standing only a few steps away, heard that tiny voice. It almost undid him. He turned slightly, pretending to adjust his coat so he could watch without intruding. Marissa handed Flora a small fork the bakery staff had tucked into the bag. The girl took a careful bite of the cake, so small it was almost invisible, and then her whole face changed. The exhaustion softened. The fear slipped away. Her eyes closed as if tasting happiness for the first time in months. Roland's throat tightened. That expression, it was the same one Lily used to make every time she tried something sweet and new. Not greedy, not wild, just pure, delicate joy. The kind children show when the world feels safe. Marissa looked up then, perhaps sensing someone watching. For a moment, she and Roland locked eyes. Not long, not awkward, but deep in a way that carried an entire conversation. Gratitude, relief, humanity shared between strangers who might otherwise have passed each other without a second glance. Roland nodded once, quietly. Marissa mouthed a soft, "Thank you," her voice too full to speak aloud. And though Roland intended to walk away, to return to his meetings, to his silent home, to the routines he clung to, his feet didn't move. Something about that mother and daughter held him there, as if fate had tugged invisible threads between their lives. He didn't know it yet, but this moment was not the end of his involvement. It was only the beginning. Roland lingered near the bakery's entrance longer than he intended, pretending to look at the cafe menu posted outside. In truth, he was watching Flora take another careful bite of cake, her face brightening as if each taste restored a piece of childhood she'd been forced to give up. Marissa sat beside her, one arm wrapped around the girl, the other brushing away tears she was trying to hide. It was a scene so tender, so raw, that Roland felt something ache inside him, a place he thought had closed forever. He exhaled slowly and turned away, reminding himself he had a meeting across town. His assistant had already texted twice. The world expected Roland Vance, the unstoppable entrepreneur, the man who built empires with quiet steel. But right now, he didn't feel like that man at all. He felt like someone who had been asleep for years and had suddenly awakened. He took a few steps down the sidewalk when a soft, hesitant voice drifted toward him. "Sir?" Roland paused. Marissa stood just behind him, clutching the paper bag against her chest. Her eyes were red from crying, but her posture had shifted slightly. Less defeated, more searching for courage. He turned gently. "Yes. I didn't get to thank you properly," she said, her voice trembling but sincere. "No one's been kind to us in a long time. I don't know how to repay—" "You don't owe me anything," he interrupted softly. "Just take care of your daughter." Marissa nodded, though her gaze fell to the ground, embarrassment seeping back in. "We've been struggling. I lost my job 2 months ago. Rent's overdue. And Flora—" She stopped, swallowing the words as if they tasted like failure. "She hasn't had a real meal in days." Roland listened quietly. He didn't rush her. He didn't try to fix anything. He simply allowed her to speak, something few people ever did for those who had fallen through the cracks. "Do you have anyone helping you?" he asked gently. Marissa shook her head. "Family is complicated, and shelters are full. I've been cleaning houses whenever I can, but it's never enough. I thought maybe if I got some expired food, anything, we could get through today." Roland felt a familiar heaviness gather in his chest. not pity, but recognition. Loss made people invisible. Hardship pushed them into shadows. He knew that feeling too well. Flora walked up beside her mother then, holding out a small pastry wrapped in parchment. "We saved this for you," she said quietly to Roland. "Mommy says you shouldn't leave without eating something too." The gesture stunned him. The child who had just received her first real treat in months had saved part of it, for him. Roland knelt slightly so he was closer to her height. "Thank you," he said, accepting the pastry with the same reverence he would give a priceless gift. "You have a very big heart." Flora smiled shyly and hid behind her mother again. Marissa exhaled shakily. "You've done more than you know. I hope someday we can stand on our feet again." Roland hesitated. A thought tugged at him. Unexpected, unplanned, but impossibly strong. "Marissa," he said softly, "would you be willing to tell me a bit more about your situation?" She blinked, confused. Why? Because he already knew this wasn't the end of their story. And deep down, so did she. Marissa hesitated at his question, unsure whether this was kindness or curiosity. For years, she had learned to share only the smallest pieces of her story, never enough to trigger pity, never enough to invite judgment. But something in Roland's voice felt different. Calm, steady, safe. She took a slow breath and nodded. "I'll tell you," she said softly, "but only because no one's asked in a long time." They moved a few steps away from the bakery doorway so customers could pass. Flora held the bag of food close, the way children cling to blankets, while Marissa found the courage to speak. "I was a receptionist at a dental clinic," she began. "Good hours, decent pay. We were doing all right. But then Flora got sick. Nothing major, just high fevers. I had to miss shifts. Too many." Marissa's eyes dimmed at the memory. "They replaced me. Just like that. And once you lose your footing, the fall is fast." Roland listened intently, expression unreadable but deeply attentive. "I sold furniture, took small cleaning jobs. We moved into a cheaper room. Then the cheaper room became a friend's couch. Then," she gestured vaguely, "now we're staying wherever we can for the night." "What about Flora's schooling?" he asked carefully. Marissa's jaw tightened. "I'm trying to keep her enrolled. She loves school. But without a stable address, and with everything else, I'm scared they'll label us." Her voice cracked. "I want her to have a future, not just survive like this." Flora tugged gently at her mother's sleeve as if sensing the pain behind the words. Roland bent down slightly, meeting the child's eyes. "What do you like about school?" he asked softly. Flora thought for a moment. "Reading," she whispered, "and drawing, and birthday cupcakes. My teacher gives them to kids on their birthday." Marissa blinked hard. Roland understood instantly. That was why the expired cake mattered. It wasn't about sugar. It was about childhood. About letting Flora feel normal, just once. He straightened again, something resolute forming behind his calm expression. "You mentioned you do cleaning work," he said. "Are you still able to take jobs?" "Yes," Marissa replied quickly, almost too quickly. "I'll do anything. I just need someone to give me a chance." Roland nodded slowly. "I might know someone looking for reliable help." She blinked in surprise. "Truly?" "I can't promise anything yet," he said, choosing his words with care. "But I can ask. And I can make sure you and Flora get a safe place to stay tonight." Marissa's breath caught. I don't want to take advantage." "This isn't advantage," he interrupted gently. "It's stability, just for one night." She covered her mouth, tears returning despite her effort to hold them back. "You don't even know us," Roland's voice softened. "Sometimes you don't need to know someone to understand their struggle." Flora reached for his hand. small fingers curling around just two of his. "Thank you," she whispered. It was such a simple phrase, but to Roland it carried the weight of every moment he thought he'd never feel useful again. He realized then that helping them wasn't just about charity, it was about purpose, something he had lost long before this day, and something he wasn't ready to lose again. Roland walked a few steps ahead, guiding Marissa and Flora toward the shaded seating area beside the bakery. The afternoon sun cast soft patterns across the pavement, but for the first time in a long while Marissa didn't feel the heat pressing on her like an unwelcome weight. She felt something lighter, something she barely recognized. Possibility. Roland pulled out his phone, not to flaunt connections, but to send one quiet message to someone he trusted. His estate manager, Evelyn. She was efficient, discreet, and known for solving problems before they even had names. Need a temporary safe room prepared, mother and child. Tonight. He didn't elaborate. Evelyn didn't need explanations. Her response came within seconds. Done. Our notice? Roland glanced at Marissa. Would you be comfortable staying somewhere safe tonight? A real place. Clean beds? Warm food? He kept his voice gentle, aware of how fragile pride could be when life had been cruel for too long. Marissa hesitated. Is it far? No, he said. Just quiet. Flora leaned into her mother's side. Can we go, Mommy? She whispered, hope trembling in her small voice. That decided it. Marissa nodded, tears brimming but no longer from shame, this time from relief. Yes, thank you. Truly. Roland exhaled softly as if some heaviness inside him eased. Good, I'll have someone prepare it now. For a moment they simply stood there, the three of them, bound not by charity but by an unexpected thread of humanity weaving their stories together. People walked past, families laughing, couples chatting, teenagers glued to their phones, unaware that a small miracle was unfolding in the middle of an ordinary street. When they began walking toward Roland's nearby car, Marissa paused. I can't keep accepting so much, she said quietly. You've already done more than anyone ever has. Roland turned to her. Marissa, helping you doesn't take anything away from me. If anything, it gives something back. She frowned slightly, unsure what he meant. He continued, voice steady but tinged with something vulnerable. When my wife and daughter died, the world felt hollow. Not because I lacked resources or comfort, but because I lacked purpose. Today, you reminded me what it feels like to matter again. Marissa's expression softened with profound understanding. Loss breaks people in different ways, she whispered. But sometimes, kindness puts them back together. Flora reached up and slipped her hand into Roland's without hesitation. The simple gesture hit him with an unexpected wave of emotion. He squeezed her hand gently, careful not to overwhelm her. As they approached the car, Roland opened the door for them, an act that felt symbolic, as though he was opening a new chapter neither of them had expected. Marissa settled into the seat, still clutching the bakery bag as if it were proof that good things did, in fact, still happen. Before starting the engine, Roland glanced back at them. Tonight is just a start, he said. You don't owe me anything, but if you're willing, we can talk tomorrow about a job, about stability, about rebuilding. Marissa pressed a trembling hand to her lips. Flora beamed, her first true smile of the day. Tomorrow sounds wonderful, Marissa whispered. Roland nodded, the faintest warmth touching his expression, and as the car pulled away from Riverside Avenue, the ordinary afternoon finally revealed itself for what it truly was. Not an ending, but the beginning of three lives finding hope again, together.